impact on the world. He was a strategic architect for consensus systems, and he invented the non-patented and open source Hexayurt refugee shelter. Maybe he'll share a bit about that. He's also been the architect of the national blockchain strategy for Dubai and a partner at Hexayurt Capital. Currently serves as the CEO of Mattereum. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and give a huge welcome to Vinay Gupta.
Thanks very much for having us. It's marvellous to be here. I know we've all worked really hard to pull this thing together, and it's fantastic to see it actually happen. I'm going to press on with the topic, which is blockchain and the future of humanity. Why this title? Why this time? And the answer is very simple. Blockchain is obviously a world-changing technology in a world that desperately needs change. We all know that stuff is busted. There isn't a single global system that seems to perform according to expectations. The internet is balkanized, finance is corrupt, international treaties are breaking down, international trade is slowing up, international shipping is way down, currencies are volatile, regimes are changing, the world is sliding in a very weird political direction. We're not doing anything about climate, the refugee crisis is all over the place. You make a laundry list of global systems which are just failing to deliver. And a lot of that is because we're just not getting our game together on using computers to solve big problems. Right? The computers are not causing most of these problems, but they can clearly solve them. You know, if you think about international trade, the vast majority of the friction in international trade is just paperwork. It's getting things through customs. It's trade finance. Those are not things which require treaties to solve. They're things which require efficient global infrastructure to solve. You need something that looks like SWIFT or Visa, but understands trade finance, that understands logistics. Something that brings the same kind of computerization you see in the Walmart or the FedEx supply chain, but rather than being confined inside of a single company, something that operates like that globally as a utility. Something which is networked, something which has many owners, or something which operates like a market. So the case I want to make is that a lot of the global problems that we face are essentially soluble in a better internet. The best guess that we have about what that better internet looks like is currently called blockchain. It's something to do with cryptography, it's something to do with markets, it's something to do with game theory, it's something to do with the ability to get competitors to cooperate. In that region, we've got several pre-existing global systems which are extremely successful. The most notable is Visa. So Visa starts in a way which is actually not that dissimilar to the way that Bitcoin starts. It starts with a small team who sit down and spend a really long time thinking very hard and draw up a proposal. The Visa proposal is, why don't banks accept each other's cards for payments? And they start with a mission statement. They start with an idea and an ideal, and they spend a ton of time convincing banks that cooperation between competitors is not only possible, but is the logical way forward for them to build a global network. And this is very, very similar to the position between Bitcoin miners. Instead of the manifesto being shipped as a piece of paper that banks signed up to, the manifesto is shipped as a piece of code that people choose to run. And the competitors who cooperate to spin up the network are, of course, the Bitcoin miners. So this paradigm of cooperation between competitors was really pioneered by the guy that invented Visa, a man called D. Hawk. And he writes about it in a book called Birth of the Chaotic Age. A long time ago, in a previous life, I was a director of the Chaotic Commons, which was the organisation that was made to propagate that. And what we take from this is the idea that cooperation between competitors relies on having very, very clear feelings about the rules of the game which are being played. And if everybody plays by those rules, the cooperation between competitors opens up enormous new vistas of economic effectiveness and economic efficiency. If you think about the impact that Visa had, it's an astonishingly powerful global system. And if you think about container shipping, all of the companies that are doing container shipping are competitors. But they also have to cooperate, otherwise these systems don't work at all. You have to be able to offload, when you have too much stuff to move around, you need to be able to buy additional capacity from people. But other times you're competing head-to-head for these gigs. It's all about enabling cooperation between competitors, and the critical requirement for that is a clear set of rules that everybody agrees that they're going to play by. Now, the blockchain is a perfect environment for setting up clear sets of rules.
You have a very clear record of what everybody did. You have an extraordinary capacity to build automated agreements in the form of things like smart contracts. And that system enables us to set up an objective framework for people that want to cooperate in a situation where they might otherwise compete. You write down the sets of agreements which cause a set of competitors to step into this new relationship with each other. Everybody signs up to play that economic game. They begin to move their assets onto those networks. And the result is the potential for an entire new wave of global infrastructure, financial, logistical, supply chain, you name it, right? Enabled by this paradigm. Now, we saw this happen at an enormous scale 50 years ago, but it hasn't really happened since then. Right? So let's take a look at some global problems that might be flexible in this kind of solution. The first thing is trade finance. Right? Everybody knows that trade finance is a mess, the paperwork is enormous, the overheads are crazy. What would it take to have global lending networks that could operate using the goods that were in the supply chain themselves as collateral? You need an ability to take an asset, to use it as collateral in a way that was visible across all kinds of jurisdictions. You need to stop people using the same asset as collateral for different loans, so you need some kind of global record keeping. You might need some kind of agreed set of standardized template contracts that would enable those trade finance systems to operate and interoperate, so that you can basically have fungibility. If you had a loan against an asset in one jurisdiction, you might want to be able to, for example, swap it for a loan against another asset in another jurisdiction. You might be able to securitize these things, build portfolios of them. But for that, the underlying loans have to be extremely standardized. Now, those kind of systems, you can sketch that out in the back of an envelope, but it looks like the kind of thing you could do with a blockchain without an enormous amount of work. There must be 50 companies that are working on some variation of that kind of system. For that to pull together into the kind of efficient global infrastructure platform that we need, we don't need a single enormous company to come into that space and take the entire thing over. What we need is enough standardization and enough goodwill between the companies that are doing these kind of trade finance solutions, between the people that are buying trade finance as a service, and we need enough standardization that these things become interoperable and fungible. And the parallel that I want to draw here is that this is a little bit like the creation of the internet itself. The internet started with a simple protocol for moving files from one machine to another machine, and from that, we slowly built layer after layer after layer of complexity. You get email, and you get Gopher, you get FTP. After a very long time, you get the web, you get IRC. But all of it comes from this idea that everybody's kind of doing their own thing with enough standardization that they can do it together. And what blockchain brings to that paradigm is very, very, very tight ability to enforce the agreements. It's the ability to fundamentally lock those things down. So we go from the old internet model, which is basically a sort of loose goodwill and a willingness to work together, to a sort of new model, which is the rigor of business with automated contracts, tying together these kind of loose agreements into things which are capable of carrying not only information and communications, but money and goods and services. So this is the kind of framework that I want to set out, right? We're in a world where the existing global systems are straining really badly. There is an enormous opportunity to bring a greater sense of global cohesion or a greater sense of global unity simply by taking all of the existing businesses which exist in every jurisdiction in the world and figuring out how to internationally network them into cooperative networks of companies that were previously competitors. And there isn't a single game in the world that this couldn't be applied to. It's a paradigmatic shift in the way that we approach business. And it basically comes from taking previous models which have been extremely successful but hard to set up and using technology to support the international cooperation necessary to build these kinds of new global trade structures. I want to give an example which is FedEx. So FedEx is an enormously tightly controlled centralized network. At the time it was created, it was thought to be impossible. It's still a very, very surprising global structure. And it operates by using computers to tie together enormous numbers of different transport assets into a service which has a single user interface. You take a box, you stick a label on it, somebody comes and picks it up, and at that point you stop caring how it gets across the world. It goes essentially by magic. Now, if you wanted to set up something that looked like FedEx today, you probably wouldn't take out an enormous loan and start buying airplanes, because the world is full of airplanes. It's full of airplanes which are underused. It's full of cars, it's full of trucks, it's full of people, it's full of guys on bicycles. Right? There's no reason that you couldn't, if you had the right set of software and the right set of contracts, weave together all of the underutilized transfer assets in the world into something that was a little bit like another FedEx. But this time, it would be a set of cooperation agreements and a set of markets, rather than a single company that controlled the in theory at least, markets are more efficient than command and control corporations once information is sufficiently cheap. This comes from the economist Ronald Coase, who won a Nobel Prize for a paper called The Nature of the Firm, which was published, I think, in 1940. So this kind of Coasean apocalypse is what you see all the way through the gig economy. It's what you see in the startups. All of these are situations where the kind of work that used to be done by single enormous corporations with R&D departments becomes broken down into a whole bunch of small components which interact with each other through complex markets. And you see this if you look at the sort of vendor and supply chain agreements between startups. Most startups are consuming services from bunches of other startups, and they're selling services to bunches of other startups. You see this when you look at the websites of the startup companies, and you look at all the different tools which are used and integrated into their websites. You see they've got tracking from these guys, and chat from these guys, and support from these guys, and finance from these guys, and invoicing from those guys. And what you see here is a meshing together of all kinds of small components into this kind of business web. Now, those kind of things don't work once you begin to bring ERP into the story. Enterprise resource planning software, things like SAP, are so big, they're so heavy, they're so cumbersome, and they're so hard to get interoperable, that as soon as you get above the level of startups, where they're bolting the companies together using little APIs, it becomes very hard to do platform cooperation between large companies. So if you go back to this notion of how would you start like FedEx, and you look at the networks of trucks and cars and planes and so on that you would need to tie together to provide that kind of functionality, at some level the fleet operators are all using their own software, the software is incompatible, and the inability to get the enterprise resource planning software to interoperate turns into the bottleneck that prevents automated cooperation. And where I see the real future of blockchain in the business is it's the necessary software patch to unlock automated cooperation between pre-existing businesses with underutilized assets. Now, that is a huge picture. If you think about the scale of underutilized assets in the world, it's on the order of 20% of everything that exists. Right? Different industries, different estimates, but it's roughly a fifth of everything which is in play. Now, what does it take to take 20% of the world's assets, which is conservatively $100 trillion of stuff, right, and bind it together into arrangements where those assets are more heavily used? What does it take to get the existing assets from the already in use and get the best possible price for the use of those assets? What it requires is extremely information-rich markets, and it requires the ability to seamlessly stitch 2 or 3 different underutilized assets together into a service that somebody needs. You can see this beginning with things like hotel websites, right? You go to an airline, they offer you a hotel, they offer you a car rental, they offer you insurance, right? That sort of bundling together is already sort of beginning to get a bit of a foothold for consumer services, but there's almost nothing like that in the business world. It's very, very, very hard to say, I want these guys to move these boxes, I want these guys to load them, I want these guys to go there and verify that they're okay for customs shipment. Well, in fact, I want there to pay these people, and I want these folks over here to do this, that, and the next thing. The basic clipping together, the modularity of business is very, very low. The transaction costs are high, the cost of connecting things are high. When you get the ERP systems into the story, there are no one-off deals that involve back-end integration of different ERP systems. So what we have is a situation which is very much like computers were pre-internet. The world of physical stuff, the goods and services, the money, all of these things are not yet inter-networked in a way that allows the smooth assembly of new structures which generate value. Value networks right now are painstakingly built by hand. You slowly assemble them a piece at a time, a link at a time. Lawyers on every single link. Contracts are slow. When things change, they break down. So what we have is this inability to put the disused assets into use and to rapidly spin up complex value networks from these disused components in a way that allows us to maximally utilize the world's resources in an efficient way. Why is this worth doing? Well, it's worth doing for the money. No doubt at all, finding a better way of using 20% of the world's capital is probably a pretty good idea. I think we could all see some benefits from that. It's also an enormously certain historical trend. Digitization gets everywhere. We did it for text, we went on to do it for media, we've done it for games, we've done it for music, film. You're beginning to see it for finance through things like crowdfunding, through blockchain itself, Bitcoin. That digitization trend is inevitable. There's no way around that. It hasn't made its way all the way through the heavy industrial world yet. It hasn't gotten through supply chain, it hasn't gotten through trade finance, it hasn't gotten through container shipping, it hasn't gone through banking. But all of those fields, although they're slow, they're not dead. Right? They might take their time to adopt, but adoption of something better than the current systems is inevitable. As that transformation goes forward, what we're looking at is an inevitable digitization of matter. We come into the situation with these disconnected, balkanized pieces of utility that are all scattered around and the assets are underused and so on. And we come into that environment, we add enough of the right kind of digital infrastructure to make these assets usable in a kind of internet-centric way. You take the assets and you clip them together. The APIs somehow sort themselves out. You take the competitors, you set a set of rules in motion through a set of contracts and smart contracts, you set up marketplaces, now the competitors can cooperate when they need excess capacity to be sold off or when they need to buy excess capacity. And you begin to gradually squeeze the waste out of the systems, you get the ability to rapidly configure around the opportunities. If you have a set of assets which have been appropriately tied together by a bunch of blockchain smart contracts, so that the assets are quickly and easily and accurately addressable. If I come into that situation and I want to sort of rapidly do something like arrange, I don't know, a round the world trip with a bunch of camels, I ought to be able to very, very quickly clip together the necessary components of the support infrastructure simply by pulling the smart contracts together and joining them to each other. So what I'm suggesting here is that over the next 10 to 30 years, there will be an inevitable transformation where we do for matter what the internet did for information. We give matter unique identifiers, the equivalent of URL for a physical thing. We give contracts connected to matter the ability to move the matter around, to buy it, to sell it, to auction it, to offer what's available, to absorb payments. You bring this kind of digital metadata to the material world in a way that enables computers to analyze what deals are possible, and in some instances these are automatically inaccurate. You build a substrate which would allow an artificial intelligence system to identify the possible complex value networks and then automatically execute them because the assets are now actually accessible to software. Right now, if you had an AI that did analysis of trade and identified opportunities, when it got around to the opportunities, it would then need to go and hire a bunch of human lawyers to go around and deal by deal by deal by deal, and you'd have to find some way of getting the computer to go drinking with people to close them. Right? But if these things had priced smart contracts attached to the assets, you could then very quickly have artificial intelligence deployed to pull out the complex value network as a possibility and then clip the pieces together to automatically execute those deals. And what we begin to talk about here is a sort of automated business metabolism, a kind of systolic process by which we index the assets that are available, we index the needs which people have, the entire substrate has been automated enough that you can do the deals automatically, and then AIs come along on the top of that and actually figure out where the value is and put the pieces together. Now, that sounds like a distant far future, right? But big infrastructure projects operate on those kind of timescales. The 10, 20, 30-year horizon is typically the kind of thing that you look at when you start thinking about roads or bridges or boats, right? Oil terminals, 30-year payback periods. These things are incredibly expensive. The digital infrastructure of the internet itself, there was an enormous fiber building process where we laid down lots and lots and lots of fiber, and then what came out of that was an enormous glut of bandwidth. And it wasn't until the invention of YouTube that that glut of bandwidth got suddenly absorbed. So where I think we are right now in the blockchain is we're at the very early stages of figuring out what the damn thing is for. Right? My company, Mattereum, is very clear that the blockchain is about adding this digital layer to matter, which allows us to get a solid grip on the matter, interconnected other structures, and move the value around. Right? This is what we do. We do asset passporting, we do smart contracts. The underlying need for this kind of new global trade infrastructure goes beyond the commercial. Once you have these kind of automated systems that understand what the assets are and understand how to interconnect them, this also gives you the ability to correctly price externalities. You can take things like carbon emissions and you can bind that information directly into the smart contracts that control an asset. This thing was made with 750 tons of carbon and it also consumed 25,000 gallons of water. And you can tag that onto the assets as a way of pricing the externalities. The same thing can be done for goods that were manufactured in less than ideal labour conditions. You can attach those kind of burdens to objects. And what this gives us is the possibility of automating policy and tax enforcement, where we begin to use taxation as a way of guiding the shape of the global economy through automated systems. You take the automated trade infrastructure, you attach pricing information where you do things like anticipate carbon taxes or even implement carbon taxes. And what that does is it rapidly begins to pool the global economy into a configuration which makes global trade not only possible, not only efficient, but slowly begins to make it clean and green. And it all comes down to the ability to attach information durably, permanently, and accurately to the physical world, so that the automated systems which we're going to use to automate trade can accurately make decisions. And I don't see any way forward other than blockchain for this kind of transformation. None of the other technologies which are being used really have the kind of scope. Blockchain is a little early, there's a lot of work which has to be done, we need scaling. But it's that basic approach of durable record keeping, cryptography, of global connectedness that I think has the potential to take the existing industrial infrastructure, the existing trade architecture and financial architecture of the world, and turn it into something which is genuinely fit for purpose in a 21st century globalized society. In a society that we expect to be clean, green and efficient, because until we have enough resources for every human being on Earth, we have a moral responsibility to be efficient in the way we use what we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinay Gupta. Pleasure.